Veterans Chronicles is sponsored by the state of Qatar, representing Qatar's commitment to the U.S.
Our guest this week on Veterans Chronicles is Art Spaulding. He's a World War II veteran who served in the 91st Chemical Mortar Battalion. He was awarded the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart for his service at the Battle of the Bulge. Mr. Spaulding, thank you very much for being with us.
I'm delighted to be here.
Where were you born and raised?
I was born, strangely, in Oxnard, California, raised in Goleta, which is essentially a suburb of Santa Barbara, California.
Lifelong Californian?
Yeah.
Okay. How old were you when Pearl Harbor was attacked?
16.
16. What was your reaction?
My reaction, I was playing in a swing band at the time, and the reaction was, let's all go home. That it was just stunning. We were all totally confused by it. I'm sure we did just plainly were unprepared.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted.
And why the Army?
Oh, because they had at that time what they called the Army Specialized Training Program, which was rather like the Navy V-12 program, where they sent the newly drafted or enlisted men off to college for an engineering degree. I went to the California Institute of Technology for that degree, but I was there only 2 months. I turned 18, and I enlisted to participate in that program.
And after they called you up, where did they send you for training?
They sent all of us, they called us ASTPers, and they said, now all of you have to go in for 13 weeks of basic infantry training. And I was put on a train to Fort Benning, Georgia, where I stayed until February of 1944. And
what did they focus on there? What did they train you to do?
All things the infantry is involved in. Everything from calisthenics to getting used to machine gun fire going right over your head.
Did you learn anything about mortars there, or not until you got to France?
Not until I got to Texas at a later time.
Oh, Texas. Okay, tell me about that.
Well, first of all, the ASTP program collapsed. They needed more soldiers at the front, so they wiped out that program and sent us all off to various infantry divisions. I went to the 94th Division in Camp McCain, Mississippi in February, but they filled up the ranks of that division very quickly, and I became surplus, and they looked at my service record. They said I was studying chemistry at Caltech. We'll put him in chemical warfare. And chemical warfare at that time consisted of 4.2-inch mortars. So they packed me off to the 91st Chemical Mortar Battalion. And that was in March of 1944.
Did that come naturally to you?
Anything that fired a bullet I was used to. And firing a mortar was something different. Anyway, the training was very effective.
When did you go to Europe?
We had about 6 months training in Texas, and in October of 1944, we shipped out of Boston, went to Liverpool, and I spent 2 days on a Canadian ship going from England over to Normandy. On the worst ship I think I've ever been on. That was comparable to combat. It was on the 18th of October of 1944 that I entered the European theater, really.
Why was it such a bad voyage? Was it the waves or the boat?
Yeah, the sea was rough to begin with, but they gave us no place to sleep. We had a barracks bag, and they put us down in the hold of the ship, and we were there for 2 days amid all kinds of turmoil. I could be more graphic if you like.
I get the picture. Little motion sickness, little nausea. Not a lot of facilities, right?
Yes.
Okay. So once you got to France, what did you do then?
Well, we waited for our equipment to arrive, and that took about a month. So we were assigned first to the 3rd United States Army under General Patton. But we had to have our equipment, and after it arrived, we went to southeastern France, where General Patton was about to mount an offensive directly into Germany.
But
the Germans sidetracked that with the onset of battle on the 16th of December of 1944.
The Battle of the Bulge.
The Battle of the Bulge.
So the Third Army made a big left turn.
And I'll guarantee that was not the most comfortable of voyages that I've been on. It was 100 miles in the middle of the night. It was snowing. The temperature was about 10 degrees. We were in an open Jeep. Floorboards of a Jeep are made of steel, and they very quickly became quite cold. And that cold penetrated the combat boots that we had, and pretty soon we didn't feel anything from our waist down. It was a terrible trip.
And it
was 100 miles.
100 miles over 2 days, right?
2 days.
What happened once you got up there?
Combat.
Right away?
Absolutely.
Tell me about it.
Well, we were assigned to the 80th Infantry Division as to provide backup for the infantry, and we were essentially guarding the south flank of the German offensive. It consisted of battles in various localities. It wasn't one great offensive, but it was spread out over a front of a number of miles with the 80th Division. But it was in snow, which by this time had amounted to about a foot deep.
So now you're frostbitten again.
Yeah, of course we had to sleep out in sleeping bags in the snow. And I must say, the first combat mission that we were assigned to, the gun next door to mine had a shell that blew up in the barrel of the mortar, killing or wounding the entire crew that was attending that gun. And I remember, one of my friends had his leg cut off right there. It was a very bad introduction to what followed, I must say.
How did you get focused after seeing something like that?
That was just the introduction, but it was caused by the ammunition that we were firing. It was ammunition that was fraudulently made, and it had serial numbers, and later we were issued sheets with all these serial numbers on them, not to fire that guy's ammunition. It came from the Garson brothers in Arkansas. And we had other incidents, but none as bad as that first one.
So what was it like to engage in combat for the first time with your mortar?
Well, it just consisted of following orders. There was a forward observer who was identifying the targets that we were shooting at, and that information came back to us in the form of numbers, how we would aim our mortar. And our reaction to combat was simply following those orders and dropping the mortar shells down the barrel and firing them. Now, the mortar shells themselves weighed about 25 pounds and had about 12 pounds of TNT in them. So they were really vicious weapons. Consisted of white phosphorus for smoke screens and high explosive for essentially killing the troops. So we would alternate that depending upon what the order that came to us was. But our reaction to combat was simply following orders.
But you were getting very precise with this, correct?
Oh, quite so. These mortars were rifled, just like a hunter's rifle. And as the gun was fired, there was a copper plate which would expand with that explosion and engage in the lands and grooves, they called them, or the riflings, which would put the spin on the mortar, and the mortar was really quite accurate as a consequence of having a spin being imparted to it.
Let's talk about that a little bit more right after this break. We'll be
Okay.
right back with Art Spaulding on Veterans Chronicles. We are back on Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Thanks for being with us. Honored to be joined today by Arthur Spaulding, a World War II veteran of the U.S. Army. And we're just talking about his service at the Battle of the Bulge. But before we get back to what happened there may be quite a few listeners who don't know what is involved in a mortar group. So tell us about what your team did and the different jobs that you all had.
Well, to begin, I should say that there is one of these dreadful weapons on display at the World War II Museum in New Orleans. And I was very interested to see that again after a hiatus of about, 70-some years.
Yes.
The 4.2-inch mortar, that was the diameter of the barrel. They weighed, all the component parts put together weighed about 400 pounds. The base plate upon which the barrel was fixed weighed about 200 pounds, and took two of us, one on each side, to manipulate it and place it in the proper position. The piece that held up the barrel was fairly light. I think that was 50 pounds. And the barrel itself weighed about 100 pounds. So we put all that together and you come up with something close to 400 pounds. So each squad, I was a buck sergeant in charge of one of those squads, consists of about 6 or 8 men, depending upon who came and went. We had a jeep to haul the trailer in which the mortar was located, and we had about 25 rounds of ammunition, each weighing 25 pounds or so, in the trailer. And that was our combat appearance.
You were already in combat, but as I've read about you, there was a moment where the Germans hit you with shrapnel where you realized you were actually at war and they were trying to kill you. Tell me about that.
How can I distinguish one incident from another? Yes, they were trying to kill us, and we were trying to kill them. So it was a Mexican standoff, if you will, in that regard. But, in the Battle of the Bulge, the offense was created by the Germans, and they were really quite effective at the outset until adequate reserves came to offset them. Because they penetrated, we were all just waiting to cross the Rhine River at that time, and that was in December of 1944.
So it was at the Bulge where you engaged in actions that led to you receiving the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. The Germans attacked your position. You were hit with shrapnel, and another friend of yours was more severely injured.
Oh, you've been reading my biography.
Yes, sir.
Well, indeed, we were setting our guns up again for some offensive to preclude the crossing of the Rhine River. And the Germans had a captain who was located in a building at the very place that we were setting our guns up. And he was in charge. He was a forward observer for a German mortar battalion. And they had 120 millimeter mortars, which were bigger than ours, but not nearly as accurate, I might say. In the midst of setting our guns up, all of a sudden mortar shells started landing among us. And, strangely enough, after one of the explosions of these incoming shells, a fragment of that shell hit the barrel of my mortar and split into two different pieces. And the bigger piece bounced off the base plate of our mortar, upon which one of my men was sitting to avoid the barrage coming in. You know, we were all dug in pits that were about 3 feet deep. So we had some way of escaping a direct barrage. And this piece bounced off the base plate and hit him right in the spine. And it was fairly large. And God, he just was in terrible agony. The other fragment that split when this piece hit the barrel entered my hand. And at the time, I was unaware, really, that I had been wounded. It felt as if somebody had just hit me with a hammer. There's an old saying, leave no man behind. And the medic we had in the platoon came to help, and the medic and I got my squad member out of this pit that we were in and hauled him off to a safe location in a building not far away. And for that, I received a Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. Well, I pulled my glove off and not realizing that I'd been wounded beforehand, and the glove was full of blood. So I was out for about 2 weeks, and they couldn't get it out because it had penetrated so deeply that the local surgeon that we had in the company, his name, I can remember his name. His name was Leo U. Zambon. Anyway, he spent a couple of hours probing around, and he said, I can't do this because of all the nerves that he had to separate to get this. So I had it taken out after VE Day when we were back in the States. But anyway, the Bronze Star came at a later time in recognition of taking care of my buddy.
Did he make it?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I never saw him again, but his wound is in his back. So that may have affected his lower extremities, but I never saw him again. Okay. He was probably taken back to England for treatment.
Art, let's pause one more time. We'll be right back with the rest of our interview. Welcome back to Veterans Chronicles on the Radio America Network. I'm Greg Columbus, honored to be joined today by Art Spaulding, a U.S. Army veteran of World War II. And, sir, when we left off, we were explaining the actions that earned you the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star. Explain your role throughout the rest of the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh, our company was attached to the 5th Infantry Division, which was one of General Patton's favorite divisions, I might say. And the whole object of the exercise at this point was getting across the Rhine River into the heartland of Germany, where we knew the war would soon be ended. Well, the first thing was to get to the Rhine, which was about 40 miles away from our immediate location where this battle occurred, where I got these awards. And the 4th Armored Division was given by General Patton 48 hours to make these 40 miles to the Rhine River. And they made it in about half that time, I might tell you, through Patton's urging, I might say. And anyhow, when we followed the 4th Armored Division very closely and arrived at the Rhine River at the time that the early crossing of the 5th Infantry Division was taking place. And we had one of our lieutenants just happened to have a Navy jacket, said U.S. Navy across it. And crossing the Rhine River is quite a naval operation. The Rhine River is very large, you know. And he put his naval jacket on in order to create some priority for our company or our battalion to get across the Rhine, because all we had to get across was an engineer's bridge, which was just a one-track bridge and not very wide. And he was directing traffic because the Navy had this as a part of their operation. It was a naval operation crossing the Rhine. And with a jacket saying USN, despite the fact that he was a lieutenant in a mortar battalion, he was the guy that got us across the Rhine. And instantly, on the other side, on the eastern side of the Rhine River, we encountered very intense combat by the Germans because they were protecting their homeland. And we found a billet for the night after that, after our crossing of the Rhine. And first thing that happened was that we were under attack by the Germans with all sorts of weapons, such as machine guns and high-powered, anything that they could put together to kill us. It was a permanent memory. We were upstairs in a building, and they were down in a field where there were fruit trees. And very shortly, they were firing at us through the window, and we were firing back at them. And our platoon lieutenant was a big man, and he told one of us to go down and get the 50 caliber machine gun off the Jeep that we had. And here he was with a 50 caliber machine gun firing by hand at the Germans firing at us, you see. So anyway, that pretty well stopped them, but not until their machine guns were MG-42s, and they fired about 1,500 rounds a minute, as opposed to our machine guns, which only had about 500 rounds per minute. And pretty soon in came a streak of these MG-42 bullets right through the window across the ceiling. And that rather scared me, I must say. But anyway, that was the last major combat. We took care of that with reserves and fortitude, I might tell you. But in the meantime, one of my guys was shot through the knee, and he had been wounded before. He was the most decorated man of our platoon, in fact. He had a Silver Star and a couple of Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, and God knows what else. And he was just plain dumb. Stupidity counted for a lot.
You mentioned a moment ago about General Patton's urging and his desire to keep pushing east. What did you and the other men think of General Patton?
Well, we were delighted to be part of his army, I must say, because if you were part of the First Army, you had General Montgomery to put up with. And Patton hated Montgomery, and the feeling was mutual. Well, Patton was a man of action, as you know. And the 5th Division was his favorite. That was wasn't the first crossing of the Rhine, but that was the first big crossing of the Rhine. And he cabled Eisenhower back at Chafe headquarters that, we just casually put one of our division across during the night. Anyway, we never saw General Patton, but on the other hand, we knew that his presence loomed very largely in the background.
So then after you crossed the Rhine, you've had this encounter with the Germans defending their homeland. From there, the run through the Rhineland was pretty overwhelming, right?
Well, it was not really. It was very quickly done. The crossing of the Rhine was about the 24th of March. And VE Day was the 8th of May, so there was virtually only a month in between. And the German army was defecting as prisoners of war to us in huge numbers. So there wasn't very effective opposition, and we were crossing the heartland of Germany by tens of miles each day after the Rhine crossing. And we eventually wound up in Bavaria on the Danube River, which was, I must say, quite nice.
Especially...
But we were on the Danube for several weeks, I think. But then after that, they turned us into military government. And I should tell you, that probably was the best part of combat in Europe. Military government consisted of our battalion being broken down into companies, companies into platoons, and platoons into squad, of which I was the captain of sergeant of one of them. And then we would be dispersed throughout Germany in control. And I wound up as the mayor of several cities, I might tell you.
Congratulations.
As a military governor, you see.
Uh-huh.
So there's some interesting incidents connected with that. We were occupying a building at one time, my squad and I, and we got up in the morning with the usual thing. This was largely, after the war. And we were all in our underwear after sleeping at night, and there came a knock on the door, and here was a German wanting to surrender, you see. He could have wiped out the whole platoon. And there was another incident in military government. The Germans they were trying to get back home, just as, of course, we were trying to get back home after the war. And we came, as a part of military government, I was riding in a Jeep, and I had an Italian machine gun with me, a big with a clip that held 40 rounds, and all of a sudden we came on 3 German soldiers that were trying to get home, but it was certainly uncertain whether or not they were going to be friendly, give up, or otherwise take us on. So they scuttled off into the brush, and I shot a couple of them.
I read about that, and the fact that you ordered them to be taken to medical care really impressed the other ones.
Immediately after that, and the survivor came up to me afterward and said, "Thank you very much for looking after our comrade."
What did that tell you?
Tells you we're all in the same boat.
How long did you stay there in the peacekeeping governing role?
Well, the 4.2-inch mortars were part of the Japanese invasion plan. And so our orders after VE Day and after this stint of military government, which was simply to keep us occupied, our plans were to go back to U.S., take our rehab furloughs, and head for Japan. So we were what was described as a hot outfit. So I was back in the U.S., I think in June. I had July as a rehab month, and then back to Texas to await further orders to Japan, and then the war was over.
What was your reaction to that?
Phew, boy. I proposed to my future wife.
Okay, so then after that, you left the Army shortly after that then?
Yeah, I was discharged, I think, in November of 1945, and had to await the onset of a semester at Caltech, and went back to school in February, a married man, and went back as a freshman, which I had been in 1943, when the school had given us leaves of absence to join the Army. See, that's why I went so early. And anyway, I stayed at Caltech. I played baseball and soccer and became a father and graduated in 1949 as a geologist and was hired by the Shell Oil Company thereafter as a member of their production department and started drilling for oil in various places.
Okay. How long did you stay with them?
I stayed with them for 8 years, and I left the Shell Oil Company because the routine simply started to bore me. And I went back to school for a year to sort out my future goals, and got a master's degree in the process, and then became what I called a geopolitician. I signed up with the city of Los Angeles first of all as a geologist, and subsequently as their petroleum administrator, which was probably the most interesting job I ever had. I was assistant administrative officer. My boss was essentially the city manager, but I was managing the oil and gas operations going on in the city of L.A. And that led to another job. The last job I had was the head of the trade association called the Western Oil and Gas Association. I became vice president and general manager and managed the WOGA operation for 10 years and became essentially the spokesman of the West Coast oil industry during that period, testifying before Congress. And oddly enough, one of my appearances before a Senate committee turned out to be fruitful in that they did what I asked them to do.
Once in a while that actually happens. Just about a minute left here, Mr. Spaulding. What are you most proud of when you think of your military service?
I think the Battle of the Bulge, where there was a true opportunity of doing something in the cause of freedom, if you will. After that, it was a denouement, because it was virtually hand-to-hand combat in the snow, in the worst weather conditions you can possibly imagine. That was a 100-year storm that overtook us in December of 1944. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the work that I did for the city and also for the petroleum industry.
Well, Mr. Spaulding, we thank you for your service and thank you for being with us today.
Well, I'm delighted to have the opportunity.
Art Spaulding, a World War II veteran of the U.S. Army and a veteran of the Battle of the Bulge, recipient of the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. I'm Greg Columbus. This is Veterans Chronicles.